In 1519, around 600 Spaniards land on the coast of Mexico. In front of them is an empire of millions. Within 2 years, the empire is gone. And the story most people are told is that those 600 men are the reason. They had steel, they had horses, they had guns. The arithmetic seems to explain itself. It does not explain itself. A few hundred men do not defeat millions, and these men did not. The fall of the Aztec Empire was decided by 2 enemies, not 1. The first marched in daylight and is named in every account. The second left no name in any logbook. It killed more people than every Spanish weapon combined, and it was never once seen by anyone it killed. This is the story of that second enemy and of a city that won its war and lost its world anyway. It is also the story of one man. He drove the conquerors out of the capital, took its throne, and held it for 80 days. To understand what was lost, look first at the city. Tenochtitlan sits on an island in a lake, in the high valley of central Mexico. Wide causeways connect it to the shore. Canals run between its houses in place of streets. Fresh water arrives along a stone aqueduct from the hill of Chapultepec. Perhaps 200,000 people live there. In 1519, it is one of the largest cities on earth, larger than any city in Spain. The first Spaniards to see it right, that they cannot quite believe it is real. The city is the center of an empire built by the Mexica, the people that later generations call the Aztecs. It rules through an alliance of cities and through tribute. Conquered peoples send cloth, food, and captives to Tenochtitlan year after year. The empire is powerful. It is also deeply resented. Around its edges lie nations that have fought the Mexica for generations and have never been broken. One of them is Tlaxcala. Remember Tlaxcala. It will matter more than any cannon. Return to that coast in 1519. The man leading the 600 Spaniards is named Hernan Cortes. He is not an army sent by a king. He is an ambitious man who has already gone beyond his orders, and behind him there is no relief force coming. What saves him is not steel, it is the resentment. As he moves inland, he meets the peoples the Mexica have taxed and raided for lifetimes. He marches first against Tlaxcala, fights them hard, and fails to defeat them. So Tlaxcala does something far more dangerous to the Mexica than fighting Cortes. It joins him. By November 1519, Cortes reaches Tenochtitlan with thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors marching beside him. The Mexica ruler, Moctezuma, receives the strangers inside the city itself. What happens in the days after is still argued over by historians. But within weeks, Moctezuma is effectively a prisoner in his own capital, controlled by a few hundred foreigners in a city of 200,000. It is a strange and unstable arrangement. It cannot hold. It breaks in the spring of 1520. Cortes leaves Tenochtitlan to deal with a rival Spanish force on the coast. While he is gone, the men he leaves in command attack a crowd of Mexican nobles gathered for a religious festival in the sacred precinct. They kill them as they dance. The city does not stay frightened, it rises. And when Cortes hurries back, he marches his men straight into a trap. Moctezuma dies during the revolt that follows. The Spanish accounts say his own people stone him for siding with the invaders. Other accounts say the Spanish kill him once he is no longer useful to them. The record does not agree, and it never will. What is certain is simpler. The foreigners are now trapped inside a hostile island city, and their only road out is a narrow causeway over open water. They run at night. On the night of June 30th, 1520, the Spanish and their allies try to escape Tenochtitlan along a causeway in the dark. The Mexica are waiting for them. War canoes close in from both sides. The causeway has gaps, where the wooden bridges have been lifted away. Men weighed down with looted gold step into those gaps and do not come back up. By morning, a large part of the force that entered the city is dead in the lake. The Spanish will remember it as the Night of Sorrows. For the Mexica, it is something else. It is a victory. They have met the most dangerous enemy they have ever faced, and they have driven him out of their city. The man who leads the Mexica through that victory is named Cuitlahuac. He is a brother of the dead Moctezuma and the lord of a lakeside city called Iztapalapa. With the foreigners gone, the Mexica raise him up as their new ruler. He inherits a capital that has just done what no one thought possible. The empire has met the conquerors, in open war, and won. Cuitlahuac begins at once to prepare the city for their return. He has no doubt at all that they will return. But something else has already come ashore. Months earlier, a second Spanish force lands on that same coast, sent from the island of Cuba to arrest Cortes. It is the force that pulled him out of Tenochtitlan in the spring. It carries soldiers, horses, and supplies, and it carries something that appears on no list and in no plan. One of the men aboard is carrying smallpox. Smallpox does not exist anywhere in the Americas before this moment. The peoples of this continent have never encountered it, and so their bodies hold no defense against it at all. In a population that has lived with the disease for centuries, many of the sick survive. In a population meeting it for the very first time, it does not behave like an illness. It behaves like a scythe, and it does not stay on the coast. It moves inland along the same roads the armies use, from town to town, faster than any messenger, through the autumn of 1520 toward the lake and the island city. There is a question worth carrying into the rest of this story. If an empire falls to something no one sent, no one aimed, and no one could even see, what is the honest word for what happened to it? Inside Tenochtitlan, Cuitlahuac knows none of this. He is doing the work of a ruler after a war. He is repairing causeways, training warriors, sending messengers to allies, preparing the defense for the army he knows is coming. He is looking outward, at the roads, watching for soldiers. The thing that will end his reign is already on those roads. It is not an army. It cannot be seen, and it cannot be fought, and by the time anyone in the city understands what it is already inside the houses. It reaches the city in the autumn of 1520. Decades later, a Spanish friar named Bernardino de Sahagún gathers the testimony of Mexica elders who lived through that autumn and writes it down in their own language. Their account survives. It is one of the most painful documents the whole period has left behind, and the reason is simple. It is not written by the conquerors. It is written by the people the disease is killing. The elders call it the Great Rash. It begins as a fever, then sores spread across the body, across the face and the chest and the arms. The skin becomes so thickly covered that the sick can no longer lie down, no longer turn over, no longer bear even to be touched. The testimony describes people who cannot move at all, who simply lie where they are, in their own houses. And then a second kind of dying begins. In a house where every single person has the rash at the same time, no one can rise. No one can carry water. No one can prepare food. The elders record, plainly, that many of the dead are not taken by the disease itself. They die of hunger and thirst, inside their homes, because everyone around them is too sick to stand. Whole families end together this way, in silence. There is no count of the dead. There cannot be. The officials whose task was to count are dying alongside everyone they would have counted. But the testimony agrees that the sickness rules the city for around 60 days, and that when it finally lifts, a great part of Tenochtitlan is simply gone. Warriors who survive the Night of Sorrows do not survive their own houses. The army that beat the conquerors is cut down without a battle. And then the rash reaches the palace. Cuitlahuac has ruled Tenochtitlan for about 80 days. Against the enemy he could see, he has done everything a ruler could do. Against this one, there is nothing any ruler can do. He falls ill in that same autumn. And he dies. The man who drove the conquerors out of the city does not fall in battle, or to a betrayal, or to any soldier's hand. He dies of a sickness so new that his language has no word for it. The city has to choose a ruler, again, in the middle of the dying. It turns to a young man named Cuitlahuac, probably still in his early 20s. He becomes the last ruler of independent Tenochtitlan. What Cuitlahuac leaves him is a fortress with much of its garrison dead, a population in shock and grief, and an enemy that is, at that very moment, growing stronger. This is the quiet center of the whole story. The Mexica were not beaten in the field. They beat the men who came to beat them. What defeated them obeyed no general, and followed no strategy, and not one person who carried it into the valley meant to. An empire can arm itself against an enemy. It cannot arm itself against one that has no army, no purpose, and no face. While the sickness moves through the city, Cortes is in Tlaxcala, and he is not resting. He is healing his survivors and waiting for the disease to finish crossing the valley. He is also building. To take a city on a lake, he must control the water. So his men build 13 small warships in pieces, carry them overland, and assemble them on the lake itself. And around him the alliance grows. Tens of thousands of warriors from Tlaxcala and other nations join the campaign, because they too can see that the Mexica are weaker now than they have ever been. The siege of Tenochtitlan begins in the late spring of 1521. The warships cut the city off from the open lake. The aqueduct from Chapultepec is broken, and the island holds no fresh water of its own. Inside the city, a population already hollowed out by disease begins to starve. The defense, led by Cuitlahuac, is fierce, and it lasts for around 90 days. This is no walkover. But the ending is no longer truly in doubt. On August 13, 1521, Tenochtitlan falls. Cuitlahuac is captured trying to leave the city by canoe. The fighting stops. What the conquerors finally walk into is not really a captured capital. It is the ruin of one. The Spanish accounts themselves describe streets full of the dead and survivors too weak to stand. The greatest city in the Americas has not so much been conquered as emptied and then occupied. And the dying does not end with the city. Smallpox is only the first of the diseases to cross the ocean. Through the rest of the century, wave after wave moves across the mainland. The population of central Mexico, counted in many millions before 1519, falls by an amount historians still argue over, though every estimate they offer is a catastrophe. The empire is not the last thing in this land to fall. It is one of the first. There is a pattern here that did not stay behind in 1521. When two worlds that have been separated for a long time finally meet, the most decisive thing that crosses between them is often not the thing anyone intended. It is not the weapon and not the treaty. It is the unplanned passenger. We tend to write history as a contest of intentions, a record of who chose what. Some of the largest changes in it were chosen by no one. The testimony of those Mexica elders still exists. It sits today in a library in the city of Florence, 12 hand-bound books written in the Mexica language beside the friar's Spanish, with painted images running down the margins. On the pages that describe the Great Rash, Mexica artists drew the sick lying in their houses, covered in the sores, exactly as their grandparents had described them. The conquest of Mexico was written down, in great detail, by the conquerors, but the thing that truly emptied the city was set down most fully by the people it was killing. They made certain it would be remembered. It has been,